Welcome to day 2 of the 2024 Art Advent Calendar. In this video, I'll guide you through a tutorial on creating a game icon like this one, starting with a sketch, then constructing the shapes, blocking in the main colors, rendering with a simple color palette, and finally adding finishing details. But before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that little bell down there to remind you every day to open another day in this Art Advent Calendar, because I have prepared 15 exclusive December videos for you. Okay, so let's get back to the video. If you downloaded the free drawing kit, you'll find this Photoshop file with a sphere I prepared for you, so make sure to check out the link in the description and download your goodies. This will be our guide to drawing and painting, and as you can see, it is already a sketch for the ornament. So on a new layer, by following the perspective rule of a sphere, let's sketch out the pattern. So keep in mind how the lines are bending around the sphere. Let's continue with sketching the rest of the ornament. So make a new layer outside this group. Let's turn on the mirror tool, which is this little butterfly you see on the top toolbar. Now we can sketch out the hook on the top of the ornament. On another new layer, let's use the symmetry once again and draw a bow. And remember when sketching the ribbon to follow the shape of the sphere. At the end, use Ctrl+E on your keyboard to merge these two layers into one sketch layer. Okay, don't turn off the symmetry tool just yet, because now we are going to make a clean line art. So go ahead and make a new layer and rename it to line art. Use the hardware brush and size it to 10 pixels. And once again, we are going to repeat the same steps and make a clean line art for the pattern, but don't forget to turn off the symmetry this time, because we don't need it in this case. Our next step in the process is coloring. So let's turn off this line art layer on top, because we are just going to focus on this part right here. Okay, so when I go and use Magic Wand tool right now and click this in this empty space to select it and color it, it actually selects everything. And that's why, because our lines aren't connected. First option in this case is to lower the layer opacity, and on a new layer with the selection lasso tool, you can select these parts and color it this way. But if you want to make it a little bit easier, this is just one extra step to help us out. So the same way as we clipped all the layers, we can unclip them by holding Alt. And now you can see these lines overlapping the base shape. You can see them outside, right? So what we're gonna do now is just to connect them. Just like this. And don't worry, this looks kind of silly, but we are going to clip once again, and as you can see, they disappeared. They're here, but they're invisible right now. Okay, so go ahead and lower the opacity, make a new layer below this one, and with the Magic Wand tool, now we can select inside. Next step is to go to Select, Modify, and Expand. I'm expanding by 10 pixels. And again, go to Select, Modify, and Smooth a little bit. All right, so back to the layer below with the Bucket tool, I'm going to Swatches and just going to select this base red. Okay, so now let's do the same thing for the bow on top. I'm going to turn off the layer so I can see better. Make a layer below the Lineart layer and lower the opacity of the actual Lineart layer. Magic wand tool, select all the parts like so. Okay. In this case, I don't want to color the same color as the bow. I don't want to color this hook on top. So with the lasso tool right here and holding Alt, you can see when you don't hold Alt, you can see this plus. And when you hold Alt, we can see this minus. So let's just unselect these parts of this hook like so. The selection is already expanded over the Lineart, so we don't have to expand it manually. So I'm just going to select, modify, and smooth a little bit. Color for the bow, I've chosen this green color just to have a little bit more like a Christmassy colors in this piece. And for the hook, I'm going to create a new layer again below this one and go to the Lineart, select these two parts. And right now we need to expand it. Okay. Don't worry about overlapping here because it is underneath. Okay. So I didn't actually prepare the color for the hook, but we're going to use this orangey color from the previous set that you can actually download, and just go with this one, or maybe even, yes, the yellow one. Base colors are done. Now it's time to actually separate the parts and place our gradients. Once we're done with our base colors, we now need to separate the parts, because right now we can only see the shape of everything, but we can't actually recognize what's inside of it. So let's go ahead and turn the Lineart layer to see what's happening. And for now, we're going to focus on this top part. So go ahead and make a new layer above the above layer and clip it like this. And we're going to go step by step. So let's start from this middle part. Go to the Lineart layer and with the magic wand tool select it, but now we need to expand the selection, as you can see. So go to modify, expand by 10 pixels, yes, and once again to smooth it out for 2 pixels. And actually I'm going to use the lasso tool and expand the selection a little bit more, okay, so we don't have these awkward edges once we paint this middle part. So go back to this clipped layer, let's call this one middle. You can call it whatever you want. That's just how I separate the names and parts of the bow in my head. So let's go to the swatches and select this shadow color right here, and with the bucket tool paint it. All right, next step is to paint these sides. Again, I'm calling this one sides because in my head it makes sense that these are the sides. So I will make a new layer below this middle layer we just created. So go back to the bow layer and just click new layer, and it will automatically clip it. All right, back to the Lineart layer, selecting every part of this sides. Again, select, go to expand, and let's smoothen it out a little bit. Right, as you can see, selection is not perfect, but it did select the majority of the part we needed. But now I'm just going to use the lasso tool and add to the selection. So again, make sure to go back to the layer, and I'm just gonna rename it to sides and actually color it the same color as this one. Okay, if you're wondering why we are not making the same selection process for these parts right here, like the main parts, it's because we can simply add a new layer below all of these layers. And when we paint whatever color, it will not affect any of these layers right here. For the actual sphere and the ornament, we don't have to do much because we only have white and red, and with the gradients it will really bring this one to life. So let's move on to gradients now. And we are now moving into my favorite part, which is adding gradients. This is part of the rendering process, but also bringing this flat shape into more. We can start with the actual ornament. So I'm just going to go to the sphere layer right here. We have our part pattern, and this white part I will just paint on a new layer below this pattern layer. I will call this one white part. Okay. For this part, I'm using soft front brush. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger like this. So the logical solution would be to go like gray and paint like this, because we are actually painting stylized stuff. I'm going to go to the reds and go a little bit to the reddish, still focusing on this not saturated part. Okay. But I want to keep it a little bit, like a little touch of color. So let's give it a three-dimensional look. So here on the sliders, when I go a little bit darker, I always slightly increase the saturation, because I don't want my shadows to be too dirty or muddy. Okay, I don't want to make them too dark. Now let's add gradients to the pattern, and to stay inside of this shape of the pattern, I'm just going to alpha lock it, which is this little lock right here. So now it will allow us to paint only inside the shape. Now it's time to move on to the bow and the hook on top. So go ahead and click on bow, and I will start with this middle part. Again, let's alpha lock it right here. Color pick this green color and go slightly to the darker shade and paint it. So it will be darker on this side, but not on this. Okay. So we can also color pick this lighter green we have here and blend it a little bit better, because again, light is coming from the left corner. I would say the main thing to keep in mind while painting is to have the light source in mind, and also using like a bigger brushes. Okay, color pick the main color and make it lighter this time, and maybe a little bit towards yellow, just to indicate where the light is actually hitting this part. On this side, not too much, because again, light is coming from the left top corner. Let's dive even more deep into refining these shadows and highlights. So right here on the bow layer, I will go to this, let's say, main layer. I will call it main. And actually what we can do, because we can add a new layer to paint for the main layer. I just want to more refine shadows on the new layer. So, okay, again, using soft round brush, I will just color pick this darkest green we have. Okay, so now what I want to do is to create a shadow that is casting from this top part of the bow, so right here. Okay, so I'm using the soft round brush, but I want to use the lasso tool, so just make selection like this. Okay, and I will deselect this part because I don't want to paint anything on this part up there. And now with the soft round brush, I will color pick. I will go a little bit darker, a little bit more saturated, and simply paint. And now I want to smooth out this edge. I want it to be more soft. So let's go to the filter and press blur, oops, and Gaussian blur. Gaussian blur, I don't know how you pronounce it, but let's see how it looks with 2.7 pixels. Or even 5. Okay, let's leave it at 5. In this part, we don't even have to blur it out. All right, let's go to the sides and make sure that it's alpha locked. And I'm going to actually color pick this the darkest green we have. If you want to have more control over your brush when you're blending, I recommend lowering the opacity of the brush. So let's say to 55% is good enough. This part is definitely hidden from the light source, so this corner right here to separate these two parts will be way darker than it is right now. So let's just paint that. So this part is all about thinking about the light source and painting according to that. As you can see, there is a lot of blending, color picking, blending, going back and forth with it, but that is the only way to achieve these smooth and nice blends. And here on the top, I want to really indicate that the light is hitting this upper part. I will now change the background color to a little bit more darker darker gray just to see the colors. So back on the base down here, let's do a little bit more refining of the whole part and gradually creating that gradient from the darkest to the lightest. So maybe go back to the pattern. Now I want to indicate more highlights on this part. So I will go towards the orange a little bit, not too much, just a little bit. Make it a little bit lighter and see what I have, definitely with the lower opacity, brush opacity. But again, we need to fix this bottom part of it. So again, a lot of color picking and a lot of blending. And now let's add a few more final details. And that means adding a little bit more highlights on the top to make everything more pop. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is to create a new layer, call it highlights. You can call it details, whatever you like, whatever you prefer. So again, using soft round brush, I'm going to color pick this lightest color that I have here on top, make it even more lighter, like so. Paint some more highlights. And in this step, I'm also defining more shadows around the pattern, as well as beneath the bow where they would be the darkest. The lasso tool can really come in handy for these very subtle details on the bow. Just make sure to do them on a new layer so you can modify and erase the excess parts you want. When it comes to the highlights on the bow, I'm still using the soft round brush, but this time I'm erasing around to achieve this look. Of course, make sure that you do this on a new layer as well. For the end, let's add some rim light, which is a secondary light source coming from the other side of the object. I just went with an orange rim light. I color picked from the swatches, but if you want to make it more interesting, you can try out with different light sources and different colors. To add even more depth and dimension, make a multiply layer for each part of the ornament. Make sure to clip it on top of everything and color pick the base color of each element. So for the bow, I used a base green color for this purpose, a base red for the ornament, and the base orange for the hook. I also made a soft light layer, but only for the highlights on the ornament. I realized it would be too much if I did that on the rest of the elements, since this is the main focal point. And that's it, my friends, for day 2. I hope you're enjoying the videos so far, and if that's the case, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down there. I always like to see what you have to say, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!